And welcome everybody to another great episode of Cup of Joe. That is right, ladies and gents, we are back once again after a long departure from one another. I must apologize for my long, departure. I know it's been a while, but don't worry, I have my reasons, and in fact, I think that today we're going to be exploring that reason. You see, I was talking a lot about, in the previous episodes in the beginnings, I'd always talk about the fact I was working on a project. And essentially, the project was a skit. I was making this skit about, like, confronting yourself. And there's something quite interesting that happened where, essentially, I had a few technical difficulties that slowed it down, but also, which is probably the big thing, I was afraid. I was afraid of showing my face. And which is actually, funny enough, the same reason why it took me so long to start a podcast in the first place, and also a part of it of why it took me so long to restart this one. In a sense, it's not so much that I'm not a very fearful person, but confronting, yourself on a media platform can be very terrifying. And I think that one of the things that I would like to explore today is fear. Because in a sense, we all have fear. And fear, everyone has, even if you don't admit it, and this is probably one of the reasons that it took me such a long time before I acted, is because in a sense I was afraid, but I could not admit to myself that it was the fear that was holding me back. I would actually just procrastinate and do other things, and then basically justify my procrastination by other. Not by fear, but by other means, being like, I'm lazy and all that. But the truth of the matter is no, I was afraid. Afraid of what? I guess there's a lot of things, but mainly like judgment, putting effort and having it go to waste, and all that kind of stuff. And so today I would like to explore just the idea of fear, because, and also the self-help idea around it. So let's start with the first thing. What is fear? Well, fear is an emotion, of course. It's a feeling. It's meant to protect you from external or internal threats, right? So the idea is, for example, there's a big forest, right? You go into the forest. There might be a predator that jumps out at you. If you're not afraid, you might just wander off to the most dangerous position and basically get killed. If you're fearful, you're going to avoid that. You're going to avoid the putting of yourself into a dangerous position, right? Or if something looks, if a piece of food looks poisonous, if a creature looks potentially dangerous, you're going to stay away, and that entails you to survive in the long term. So fear is an emotional response made to protect, right? And which, by the way, is a great advantage. I mean, that's why basically all animals have that fear response. Well, almost all animals. I mean, jellyfish, no, but, they don't have a brain either, so. So yeah, it's an emotional response to protect yourself. And one of the big things that's very interesting with fear, it's there's we describe three things, in a sense, of how fear will respond. Well, make our bodies respond. Either it's going to make us freeze, either it's going to make us run away, or fight. Now, the two first ones the two second ones kind of make sense, in a sense, if something's scary, and can hurt you, therefore, you're going to want to run away from the problem, or if you're stuck, you're going to want to destroy the problem. In fact, everyone kind of knows that when it comes to for example, I think a big part of hate towards other people can come towards a fear response. If you're afraid of someone, you're either, going to try to avoid them, or if you feel like you can't, the idea of destroying them comes to mind, like the sort of hate that you sort of build in your head. But today, those are not really the ones I really want to explore more particularly. The one I really want to explore is the first option, so the freezing up. So weird response, right? You wouldn't expect a creature to freeze when it sees something that is dangerous. But if you understand a bit the origins, it kind of makes sense. Imagine you're a hunter. and you're walking, I don't know, through a savanna or whatever, and there's a predator. Now, the predator might not have seen you yet, but you noticed it. So what do? Your body freezes. What it does is essentially is act as if it wasn't there and let the danger, in a sense, leave, right? Now, in the wild, it most likely helped, right? I mean, think about it. If you run away, so some predators, for example, wolves, will only attack if you're running away, right? Because essentially they don't want to take the risk of being hurt, so they'll just wait that you run and then they'll pounce then. Or again, some animals, like I said, won't notice you and will only notice you if you run away. So really, staying put can be a valuable option in the savannah. Now, when it comes to real life, it gets a little more complicated, right? I mean, modern life, to be more specific. You see, imagine, as you will, the deers, right? The deers that cross a road and then see a car coming through, and then they freeze up, and then they basically get hit by the car. That's a good example of that technique doesn't really work all the time, because, sometimes the threat does see you, and sometimes the threat does rush at you, and you have to move out of the way. Or, let's say you were, like in the movies, like on a waterfall, and as you're about to fall off, it's like, if you freeze up here, well, you're dead. You're gonna just fall off the waterfall. And so some moments, freezing up is a terrible idea. But granted, it's an evolutionary tactic, and it doesn't mean it's always useful. It just means that it survived, and so what survives, right? Anyway, but in modern times, I've noticed that even though we don't like to admit it, we do still have those fear responses. The only difference is that the creature or fear is not so much a literal fear, right? So sometimes it is, like if your wife and your husband beats you, then maybe the fear is, your husband or, muggers or stuff like that. So that's our physical fears in real life. But, what I mean by that is most people, the fears are abstract fears. Now, first of all, abstract fears work the same way as any fear. It's just that the emotion, in a sense, is more dissipated throughout time. Because in a sense, if you had a specific predator, you would look at that specific predator, and like all the emotional fear response that you would have would be very intense for one moment, right? It'd be, that is the danger, go away. But when it's abstract, right? When it's an idea, you don't see a physical form that makes you have that intense emotional in one moment, but actually you have this fear response that kind of is much lower, but constant. So you constantly want to avoid whatever that thing is. Excuse me. And one of the things that's very interesting is that fear response, one of the things that fear responds naturally to is unknown, right? Or potential of danger, or, danger / just negative, emotion. And you can think about, like, let's say you're about to do an exam. The fear might be, I don't know what the exam's going to ask me. I don't know if I'm well prepared. And also, I am afraid. I don't want to get hurt by the result, right? Let's say I arrive there and I have no clue what the questions are and I can't answer them, and then I basically get 0, and then I have to redo the year, or have to find an easy job or whatever, So it's your fear is abstract in a sense. It's like, I'm not afraid of the piece of paper, right? Not literally. I'm not afraid of questions in general, and I'm not afraid of like the teacher, nor the students around me, nor the 1 hour I'm about to spend. I'm afraid of the symbolic predator that lies in this exam, right? In a sense, and again, it's the unknown of the circumstance. Like if you see a tiger, your fear is not necessarily unknown, but the immediate danger. But if you see a lot of modern things, it's the unknown and the potential danger that will come from it. So, in my case, that's exactly what was happening. See, it's not that I'm afraid of talking on a mic, because I did that a while ago. It's not necessarily that I'm afraid of showing my face, because I've done that in a few sketches. But it is the fear of mediocrity. It's the fear of wasting so much time and basically regretting it as soon as I post it. And it was the fear also that I just get hate for things that I feel is undeserving. Like, for example, my physical aspect. I don't think I'm unattractive, but I just feel like, I've heard a lot of stories about people getting hate online, and that was kind of scary to me. So there's a lot of those fears that were coming up, and again, it's not a physical thing; it's just an abstract thing. And one of the things, okay, so here's another problem, which is that you have essentially two things that motivate you, right? You can say you have like a part of your brain that motivates you to go forward, and a part of your brain that holds you back. And you could say, this is very simplified, but essentially like the motivational factors are what is good that you could go get, right, if you move, and the stopping factor is what is dangerous, and if that danger comes and attacks you, what will you lose, right? And based on what you can lose and what you can gain, your brain will sort of do a calculation to figure out, should I actually move forward? And you see, when the fear is abstract, the calculation is much more unclear. Now let me give you an example, a more literal example. Let's go back to the savannah once more. Imagine you're in the savannah and then you see, like, I don't know, a beautiful slab of meat, okay? Just in the middle of the wild, okay? And it's like, it seems unprotected, right? I mean, you could be a chimpanzee at this point. It doesn't matter. You're not necessarily human. You're just an animal, and you see like this perfect amount of food just placed there in the middle, obvious, super easy to obtain, right? Okay, so then you advance, but then you can kind of see the brain thinking, and the brain's going, wait a minute, how is this so easy, right? And so then there's not necessarily a predator, but your brain already creates this symbolic predator, right? It says, what if there's X amount of predator around you? So then you freeze and you look around and you don't see a predator. So your motivational system goes, no, go get that reward. It's a straight up reward and there's no negative consequence. And the motivational sector would not necessarily evaluate consequence, simply motivate you to go get the reward. But as I said, the sort of abstraction is that you don't know what the danger is. And so your fear is actually growing, right? It's growing exponentially, trying to figure out what is the possible outcomes that could happen. And sometimes it'll be even irrational to protect you, because essentially it seems too easy. And it can't really specifically tell you what is dangerous about the situation, but it knows that if it's so easy like that, there must be something. And so it starts calculating. And you can kind of see in an animal, if you ever see a video of this, like just look at an animal and give it something really too easy. Not your dog, because your dog is like, it knows why you're giving it a treat. But if it was something really like just a wild animal and you just give them a piece of food, you can kind of see them evaluate, right? Like a seagull, whatever, they'll kind of like advance and they'll pick it and they'll run away quickly, right? Because the idea is like, I don't know why you're giving me this, right? It might be a trap. And because of that, so they kind of like evaluate. And as they're evaluating, like I said, it's like they're creating these metaphorical fears. And then they're advancing, and if the metaphorical fear becomes more real to them, and in a sense the potential danger becomes not, basically, if it makes the food not worth it, they're going to freeze again. And maybe back up a bit, then they'll get a little closer when they realize the fears are rational. And I'm not saying that all animals do this, I'm just, I'm talking in generalities here. So anyway, there's this calculation, and you can see that person, that creature, hesitating towards the food. Now, most of the time they will get the food if nothing happens, but that if there's one sound that appears, the animal's just going to fly out, right? Just going to run away immediately. All right, abandon the food, run away. Squirrels do that, by the way. Like, if I was talking about like looking at seagulls, if you look at squirrels, and like if you ever put like a feeder or whatever, and the feeder seems too evident, like they walk really closely and they get, they figure out how to get there, but as soon as they hear one sound, they get the hell out of it. Like, even if the sound is like literally means nothing, they're going to run away anyway. Anyway. So yeah, there's this constant calculation, and so in real life, that happens all the time when you think about anything. And here's another thing that's kind of interesting. One of the things that we don't think about is the potential of lost effort is also something that we fear, right? So here's a good example. Let's say you put a lot of effort in an exam, right? Like a lot of effort, like you really study, and it turns out that you get an F. See, what's really scary about that reality is not necessarily the fact that you got an F, but it's what does that F represent when you put that much effort? It represents, potentially, that you cannot succeed, right? And that is terrifying. Because essentially it changes your environment in a literal sense. So what I mean by that is, like, you look around you, right, and you feel as if you're in a comfortable space, but when you get that F, your environment essentially becomes, I'm not in a comfortable state, I'm in a non-permanent state, right? So it's like, let's say you're in school, it's like, okay, this is comfortable, I succeed in school, then I get to college or whatever, and then I'll get a job, and it's easy. But as soon as you fail, it's, I am no more in this, just like, I'm not in this train stop to my success. I'm actually in this place that's gonna lead me nowhere, right? Because I'm just gonna fail. And so essentially it creates this new danger all around you. It changes your environment, and so the fear of getting an F after putting so much effort is terrifying. I think that's one of the reasons, by the way, that sometimes people will just not put enough effort, even if it's important. And if they like half get it, if they get like a C or like a B minus, they'll be like, I didn't put that much effort, so I must be smart, right? Something like that. Essentially, it's less scary if you put a little less effort and you get a little less good grade, versus if you put a lot of effort and you get like a B minus, then it probably hurts more. Anyway, regardless. So what I'm saying here is that your brain does a calculation, and it tries to calculate what is worth it, what is not. And your fear, or like the part of you that slows you down and the part of your motivation, they're not the same part of the brain, right? They're very distinct, and they try to in a sense win to protect you, right? The motivational system considers that getting rewards is the way to survive, and the fear system considers that protecting you from all the dangers is the way to survive. They're both right to an extent, but they have to, in a sense, they're like politicians. They have to like convince you that their side is the right side and vote for them, right? So act based on their recommendation. And so in life, not only can you, like, even if you rationalize something, it doesn't matter, because emotions are irrational in general, which is normal, because you don't really need to rationalize when it comes to danger, right? Like, danger is run away. There's no rationale here. It's like, why should I run away from danger? No. There's none of that. No need. It's much more. It's too complicated for survival to rationalize fear, right? Like, why? Like an insect can run away in fear. It doesn't need to rationalize. It's super easy to create a system of danger, run away, right? And then afterwards, creating a system to analyze that danger, it's much easier to just generalize a lot of the aspects than, for example, unknown danger, right? That's an easy association. Very simple. Can protect the creatures. Most creatures that have that association survive, and therefore it is kept. So the emotion is irrational, but also the reward system is not a great convincer. The problem is, if you're not in a story, right? If you're not, because most of the time what happens to motivate yourself is that you put yourself in a story where the reward essentially becomes bigger than what you'd say, right? So you're like, it's not just, getting that job. It is the success of my life, right? It is the beginning to the greatest part of myself, or stuff like that. You're basically going to put yourself in this sort of narrative where you say, this is a much bigger prize than what you can see, right? And then it makes it more worth it to sacrifice the fear, right? So we lie, in a sense, in a motivational way, but if we can realize that, in a sense, we're hyping ourselves up based on the reward. Addicts do that too, by the way. Like something like a drug, you'll be like, this is not just a drug, this is like the greatest moment, right, that I'm going to miss out on. And then you're trying to convince yourself to go. In fact, you could say addicts, the problem is they don't see the fear enough, but they hype a lot their motivation. Like, they downplay the fear, they hype a lot their motivation. Now, and also the fear is less intense because you already know what's about to happen. Like, even though there's a lot of danger there, it's like the things that you do know, they're not as scary because you've experienced them. Like, you don't have the chaos of the event as much, and you can kind of hide yourself from other aspects. But anyway, for me, in my situation, it would be, I'm afraid of the unknown and the potential danger. And as soon as I was working on the sketch, for example, the closer I got to the finishing of the sketch, the more the potential dangers got bigger, right? The more the reality of those unknowns got bigger by the day. Kind of like an exam. You can kind of imagine this, like, every day you get closer to the exam, a little more fear appears, right? And the thing that gets problematic is that as I advance, it's like my brain is calculating and saying, is this worth the risk. And now here, let's talk about self-help a bit. So in self-help, people would say, just go for it, like, go for it, follow your dreams, all that stuff. And like, put your fear on the side. Now, as much as I like that whole idea, there is a reality here, which is that the way they always describe it is as if you do not do this, right? If you don't follow your dream to the fullest extent, if you don't really go to the ends of the earth, you will essentially die. Well, not die, but essentially your life will be meaningless, and you'll just unviable, right? You have to do this one thing. Now again, I find that that's like the story thing. We tell ourselves a story to motivate ourselves there, and it works. I mean, people succeed because of that. But the downside is that the reality of things is that most people don't follow their dreams, and they're fine, right? So what I mean by that is the bosses at Walmart, or at any company that clearly they didn't want to necessarily be there, or people that most people in this planet, because we're not all rich. Most people on this planet, they would like to have a family, right? Be financially stable, and have some pastimes, that they enjoy. That would be their lives. And if they had that, it would be the, one of the greatest things you could ever have, right? And the following their dream thing, barely even taken into consideration. They see it as a simple fantasy. And the truth of the matter is, you could say that's inviable. I say there's no reason why that's inviable. Right? Logically speaking, that is a great way to survive, right? Evolutionary speaking, that is an amazing way to survive. Now, you can take a risk, right? Take a risk and try to follow your dreams, right? Because in a sense, nihilism tells you that if you believe in that nihilism, you can say, well, nothing matters, and so might as well do what I wish to do, right? And so, yeah, that's totally viable. But again, it's like, your brain, first of all, your brain is not programmed for nihilism, right? Your brain is not programmed to assume that nothing matters. No, what it cares about is survival. And so it doesn't look at your dream as something necessary, right? Your brain doesn't go, even your you can kind of feel it. It's like your motivational system only kind of encourages you if it believes it's the only thing it can do, right? If it believes that everything is relying on that success. Right? But if you don't look at that way, then your motivation system is so much less intense. And you can, I talk to a lot of my friends, and I look at myself, and it's like, even though I really want that success, I don't feel motivated in the same way that simple things motivate me, right? Like going to a job interview motivates the fuck out of me compared to just working on things that I enjoy, which is really interesting, because in a sense, what's happening is my brain's like, this is not important. Right? This is there is a reward there, but it's not a necessary reward. It is a big risk, right? So a big calculation of fear versus a potential big reward. And in a sense, when you think about it that way, it's it kind of makes sense why it's so hard to especially start, I would say. Because once you're in the motions, it's sort of the necessity of continuing actually commences, right? It's sort of your motivation system and your fear system actually activate to keep you, make you roll, because it's you don't want to stop this system. You got a reward a bit, so that feels good, and then the fear of stopping appears, and so now both systems push you forward. And that's one of the reasons I think that people put themselves in a story to at least start. They need a story to motivate themselves to start, and then once they started, then they let their natural motivations or natural fears start the engine, if you will. But like I said, the problem is it's story, and it's totally natural for your body to stop you in the beginning, because it's why the hell would you take a risk that you don't have to take, right? And your fear is saying, don't take it, there's too much fear, there's too much potential danger here, and there's not enough reward, and you can't see the reward, and you're not going to get the reward for a very long time, right? And again, even if you get the reward, your brain goes, why would you want to get this reward anyway? It's not necessary, right? So what I'm saying is that calculation kind of blocks you. And, it blocked me. It blocked me for almost 3 months. And in fact, to an extent, I didn't even know if I was, I loved the podcast, but I was afraid of coming back and saying, hey, I didn't do the sketch yet. But, I think what you have to do, and this is what I'm going to try to do, is to just, there's a saying of, just continue producing. I think it's like you have to learn to respect the fear and respect the motivation instead of you're not because I don't like the idea of exploiting your system, right? Like I said, creating a story is very powerful, but I don't like lying to myself, right? Being like, oh, this is the most. No, if I know it's not the most important thing, I will not. Personally, I don't allow myself to justify myself through lies, and the reason is because I've done it before, and the thing is, a lie can only get you that far, and at some point, it's like you have to wake up, and when you wake up, you feel like you betrayed yourself, even if it was a good reason. It's kind of like, imagine your dad tells you. Just lies about, I don't know, let's say you didn't have a mom, and then your dad lies of why your mom isn't there, right? And then you grow up, and then your dad actually says, oh, by the way, I lied. Your mom is, for example, alive, and she lives in Ohio. I don't know. The thing is about it, they might say, oh, I didn't tell you because, it would have been harder for you when you were young, which seems like a good argument. But depending on who you are, I know personally, I feel like it's more like a betrayal, because in a sense it's like I could have spent a lot of my youth thinking about how to deal with this, and then maybe learning some valuable lessons and living in a truth. Essentially, the thing is, even if it's more comfortable, it's certainly problematic to not see that truth, because in a sense it's like you were living in a lie, and now that you're now that you are revealed the truth, all your foundations, right, through all your youth, are wrong. You have to change them, right? Like all the things that you thought about yourself, all the things, well, not necessarily all, but you get my point. It's like a lot of your past must be revised, because in a sense you were wrong about something, because they hid it from you. So that's just kind of the same idea for me. It's like, if I pretend that it's the most important thing in my life, well, I'm going to build, everything will be structured around the success of whatever I'm going towards. And then if I fail at that success, I will consider my life to be invalid, and I will look back and say, I have no foundations to go anywhere else. Which is technically true, because I didn't think I could go anywhere else. I thought there was only this, right? And so the problem essentially is that the foundation is wrong, and because you lied to yourself. And now, the good side is that if you do succeed, you don't have to think about that, right? But if you don't, I'm not saying necessarily live as if you're going to fail. It's more so that, like, live in the truth of things, so that if whatever happens, it happens, like, you are prepared in the way that you should have been prepared, revealed by the truth, right? Like, if you think you're going to have, if the doctor lies to you and says you're going to have one kid when you're actually going to have triplets, I think you're not going to be prepared the same way, right? Even if you succeed at the pregnancy, you kind of messed up because you didn't prepare. Right? If you lived in the reality, you could have prepared better. And so that's my point. It's like, what is my reality, for example? Well, I might not succeed in YouTube. I want to, and I'm going to try hard to. I might not succeed in media world in general. I'm going to continue to do things with philosophy, discussion, art, and all that. And I'm never gonna stop in that way, because I just enjoy them too much to live without them. But I also prioritize my family beyond everything else. So it's like, I don't want to, for example, if I invest everything for, I don't know, let's say 10 years, and then it turns out that I'm not financially stable enough to have a family, then I'm really going to be screwed. Because I really wanted a family, and I really wanted, I want a young family. And so the idea is, if I lived in truth, I'm like, look, you can succeed, and you probably will. If you work really hard, you really work hard, and you push yourself, you might have a amount of success that you find valuable, and you may be financially stable, right? Great. But do not be fooled, because it doesn't mean that you necessarily will. And so now, living in truth, I understand, and I try to build my life in a way where I could survive, Like I have, for example, a job on the side. That would be an important thing to have a job on the side, not just put everything into YouTube. And I'm not saying that you should do like I am. My point is simply that I don't like this sort of lie that we do to motivate ourselves to go beyond our fear. But I do understand the reasoning behind it. So essentially, let's go back to, what should you do if you decide, all right, I don't want to put myself in a story, but I do want to succeed, right? I do want to get through that motivational hill. Well, I think then you have to do incremental steps. The truth of the matter is you can't do revolutions without a narrative, right? I mean, hell, in an actual revolution, people, they really create this big, powerful story to justify what you're doing, and you can't do that because, well, a story is a story, right? There's some truth, but it's not the whole truth. And so what you have to do is basically put your finger out into the chaos and feel how it is, and then pull it back in, right? And then learn to put a little more. It'll be incremental. And as you incrementally advance, right? Even if it's unpolished. I mean, if you look at my podcast, you don't see my face. My audio is, it needs some work. Let's put it that way. And I still need to work on the coherence of what I'm saying. And the clarity of what I'm saying. So, yeah, it's dirty, but it's actually like I'm poking my finger out, right? And I'm putting it back in, and I'm poking a little more back in. And when I was doing the sketch, excuse me, when I was doing the sketch, essentially I was practicing looking myself film, right? I was practicing my face. What I probably will do, and we'll see, is probably not do the sketch necessarily, but actually publish something where you can see my face, right? Not a TikTok, God no, but something like smaller maybe, or something a little more comfortable, where the polish is less important, and therefore I will be able to be a little more comfortable showing my face. And then as I do that, I'll probably, like I said, go back again to my podcast where at least I can basically be more raw. And then, again, put a little of my fingers in, fingers back, and all that. And that's kind of my plan. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily the best plan, but I'm thinking, if you think about how fear works, if you think about the motivational system and the calculation that your brain does, it's like the only way you can quell your fear, right, without lying to yourself in a narrative, is to essentially investigate that fear, right? Investigate to see how much are you actually right about this fear. So how do you do that? Well, you test it out. You don't jump out, right, and see if a lion will jump at you, right? But you basically look to see how many predators are there, how much is intense, right? Kind of like is it cold outside, right? Or is the pool cold? You put your toe in the water. And if it's too cold, you don't, I'm not saying you don't go back ever again, right? If I feel pain, doesn't mean that I won't put my finger again. But it's rather that you remove the fear of chaos from the equation, right? And so now you just have to confront the actual predator, if you will. And that is much easier to deal with. When you think about any fear, when it comes to roller coasters, vaccines, needles more specifically, spiders, whatever, it's not necessarily the thing itself, but what the thing could do. Now, if you know what the thing can do, if you know the chaos, you dispel it with the chaos, all that is left is the tiny thing that you're afraid of, and you can now rationalization can come in, and now you can really simplify things. For example, if you're afraid of a needle, right? It's like you have this chaos of pain, right? And you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? How much you're going to go in? How much blood? But if you kind of know how a vaccine will go, right? Then really you can pinch yourself really hard and be like, that's a vaccine, right? That's a needle, okay? It's that for 10 seconds, and then the fear kind of goes away. You don't want the pain, but you kind of be like, well, look, it's worth whatever I'm taking. I'm going to do it, right? Or if you're thinking about a roller coaster, it's like if you do enough roller coasters, and this one looks intensely scary, the chaos kind of goes away if you go well, it's probably going to feel the same way as other roller coasters, but maybe a little longer. Okay, well, then you can do it. Then you can confront that fear, right? There's less predatoriness in it. So I think that's again, you don't need that narrative to push you to do it. You can literally just be rational and actually move forward. It doesn't mean that it's going to be as easy. It's still going to be afraid because you know what's about to happen, right? If you knew that your boss was about to fire you, you might not want to go to work, but you know what it is, and you'd be like, all right, I'm going to just do it. All right, I'm going to get it over with. And so that's my recommendation. More to myself than anything else. I'm happy I did this podcast. I know it's been a while, and yes, I will be restarting these. I have a lot of things to say, because one of the things is, even if I don't do this podcast, trust me, I am a guy who thinks. And I have a lot of subjects I want to talk about. And, I hope you guys and girls are ready to hop back with me and and continue my journey. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it's a little bit out of nowhere. I know it's a little more personal, but I think that was important. And I hope I was clear. I was exploring this idea more for myself again than maybe for the audience, but I think that's necessary right now. I think I had to do this. Yeah, now it almost sounds like a narrative, right? I had to do this for myself. So, I mean, I'm a bit of a hypocrite. I still do use narratives. They're very useful. Anyway, so this was another great episode of Cup of Joe. I will see you next time, which I don't know when that is. I'm actually moving soon.